Sure.
I just accidentally hit record review, so.
I once had somebody years ago when you guys used to have tapes in there, do a whole interview. She got to the end and she went, "There's no tape in here." So I said, well, I'll see if I was better the second time. All set?
Yes.
We're pleased to be here with the Wisconsin Realtors Association, as I pointed out. And these are the folks that are at the front lines, seeing how the economy is either good or bad. In the past, obviously many years ago, it was a tough time for realtors. We've started to see that come back. Obviously, they're very interested in what we've done over the last several years in terms of property tax relief. And I'm pleased, as I point out the last week or so, that we worked things out with the state Senate so that next week we'll see the Senate bring up our Blueprint for Prosperity, which includes our property and income tax relief. And then we believe shortly thereafter, the State Assembly will concur in the changes they made. And I'll be able to have this signed by the end of March, which was our goal all along. Because of that, as I mentioned, property taxes on a typical home, because of our Blueprint for Prosperity, will actually be lower in December of 2010, not only than they were last December, they'll actually be lower in December of 2010 than they were in December of 2014 than they were in December of 2010. And one of the things I've heard, not just talking to folks here, but to other realtors across the state, is what a big deal that is for selling homes and how important it is. We've been looking at some time of the positive reaction to that just through 2014. And it's my goal as we start to look in the next coming months is putting our budget plans together for the budget we'll introduce next February for the next biennium and beyond, that we want to send a powerful message here that is our goal to make sure that property taxes continue to go down, and that in December of 2018, our goal would be 4 years from now, just as property taxes are lower, will be lower this December than they were in 2010. The same can be said in December of 2018. We think that's good news, certainly for property owners, for working families, for senior citizens, for family farmers, for small businesses in the state. We think it's also particularly good news for the real estate business, because it's one more way that we remove a barrier particularly for new families and for others seeking to live their piece of the American dream, their sliver of the American dream, by being able to purchase a home, particularly for the first time. And we think holding the line on property tax is a key part of that.
Governor, does your proposal start by keeping the levy caps in place for the local governments?
We'd look at that. What we wanted to do with today with the realtors was to lay out what our goal is. We'll obviously, as we put together the next budget, as we prepare for that, look at spending controls at the local level. That'll be a key part of that. What's the appropriate measure, and then look at how many additional dollars we need to put in, whether it's portions of the school aid formula, or as we've done recently with the latest proposal, looking at buying down more of the tech school property tax levy as well. That obviously is an area where I think there's been a positive reaction to this current proposal, just because it doesn't have the ebbs and flows that you see in the school aid formula, but it'll probably end up being a combination. But we're not. Today we're announcing what our goal is and what our commitment is to work with the realtors on. We'll be working obviously this year into early next year on the specifics of how we do that, begin to do that in the next biennial budget.
Governor Walker, you recently launched your Tax Reform Initiative website. What's some of the feedback you're getting on that?
Well, we see it from not only the website, but I think more so I've heard of late, we'll be accumulating hopefully not just comments on yes, no kind of answers, but on feedback on how people feel about certain taxes. Certainly we've gotten a fair amount of feedback from individual taxpayers, even when I've asked about this around the state, that property taxes are a big deal. It's part of why I'm announcing this commitment today. But certainly if we were able to look at changes in income taxes, what would be the trade-off? Should you just do it through reduced spending, through revenue growth and other parts of the budget, or through other changes? And what we're trying to get a handle on is if we were to make any changes, where's the right area? But I don't know that there's one common theme other than people would like lower taxes. That's probably not surprising that people say they like lower taxes. The question is which ones and which ones are the most effective.
Governor, you've criticized Mary Burke for not having a jobs plan, and here you are today announcing a property tax goal without any plan. Why should people give that any credence?
Sure. I think the proof is in the pudding, in the sense that we put a plan in place in the last two budgets, and we see property taxes down on the December 2014 bill from where they were in 2010. It's part of the reason why we set this goal, is we've done it before. We think we can do it again, and we think with a group like this, it's important, as they're looking to help people live their piece of the American dream, particularly for the first time, that we help tell them about the barriers we're going to get out of the way to make that possible. And I think that's a huge difference. And obviously, once I'm a candidate after as the spring approaches, once I get in the election, I'll be talking about not just my record, but I'll be talking about great details about what I'd like to do in the next 4 years as a candidate. But for now, I'm really talking about, as a governor, what we've done and what we'd like to project in the future.
Governor,
Here and there.
the CEO of Culver's came out this week saying that he supports an increase to 1010 state minimum wage. He's really the first major employer to come out and publicly state that. Do you fear that as more of that comes out, that there's going to be more pressure on your administration to allow that to happen?
No, I mean, the CBO nationally showed that the 1010 would actually lose 500,000 jobs across the state, or excuse me, across the country. What I think people want more than anything is more jobs. And if you've got a nonpartisan entity that's showing us we'd lose 500,000 jobs, I think that's pretty serious. For us, what we're going to do, I was on the phone today, a company that's actually going to announce within the next month. I thank them for the commitment. They're just in the process of getting ready to announce it. But they're going to have 165 more jobs here in the state of Wisconsin. I was literally talking to them a couple hours ago. And the average job pays, I believe, $22 an hour. So our answer to those who push for this sort of proposal is to say, we're going to create jobs that more than double the minimum wage proposal they have, but we're going to do it by helping businesses create those jobs, not putting up barriers to create them in the first place.
Is your staff allowed to use private emails to conduct any official business currently in the governor's office? And a separate related question, can they use private emails in private laptops in your office? So private emails and private laptops.
Well, again, the policies, and you guys all have copies of the policy that we have everybody sign off on, is pretty concrete on that. So I'll let you look at the particulars in the policy as to what they can or can't do in terms of what permission they have to ask for any of those sorts of things. But that's all very clearly laid out in the policy. We started out in 2011 enacting something very similar to what Governor Doyle had in the past. When Eric Shute came on as chief of staff, we took it a step further and actually required not only the training that we had in review, but ultimately all of our staff to sign documents saying that they were not only had reviewed that and were trained in that, but that they adhered by that. So I think we're fairly direct and straightforward in that regard.
Was that something that Eric had, when he came in and evaluated things at COS, is that something that he thought and recommended to you?
Yeah, it was something he and Brian Hagedorn sat down and looked at and thought it was taking it a step forward. Again, what we had was very similar when I first came into what Governor Doyle had. As far as my knowledge is, I don't believe they had a signed policy or of any sort. They just had an overall policy, which is very similar to what we started out with. And he recommended, and I thought it was a good idea, that you take it the next step forward and make sure that not only my staff, but cabinet, those that were in place and those that would come on board would have to do that going forward.
Was the requiring of that signed document in reaction at all to the raid on Cindy Archer's house 2 months earlier?
No, I mean, it was just something that Eric had brought up. And he went through and made a number of recommendations in terms of staff and other things in that regard.
Governor, the Senator Miller and Representative Shanklin introduced a bill today for 30% renewables by 2030, including wind and solar. Can you talk a little bit about some of your energy policy stuff?
From my standpoint, I want all the above. I want solar, I want wind, but by the same token, I know that over 60% of manufacturing in the state is done through coal. And so I'm not going to do things that handicap the largest industry that we have here in the state of Wisconsin. I want clean burning coal, I want natural gas, I want nuclear, I want wind, I want solar. I want to have cost-effective and reliable sources of power. And I know if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how much good you do in other things. If you don't have power and a workforce and infrastructure when it comes to transportation, you're not going to have employers here. And so I'm not going to do things that put up a barrier to economic growth in the state. And again, my view is I want an all-the-above comprehensive policy for energy in the state.
Time for one more.
There's a part of this chart on your property tax plan that says, pledge to either keep them steady or keep them lower, but comparing 2014's number of the net tax on median home value to 2018, it seems like it's only decreased by $1. Is that what you're planning on doing, just keeping it level instead of having any sort of reduction, or is this a mistake? I'm just curious.
No, it's exactly right. We'd have it lower, and in fact, we may go further than that, but we're saying at a minimum, it's going to be just below where it was at in 14, which is significantly below where it was at in 10. We'd like to chip at it even more, but we think that's a pretty firm commitment for folks who, as we all know, in the 10 years before I took office, property taxes in this state went up 27%. That is a huge negative, not only in the economy, but on senior citizens living on fixed incomes and working families struggling to get by, certainly in farmers who have a fair amount of property as a part of their operations. And one of the biggest costs for small businesses in the state, overwhelmingly, is property taxes. And so we've taken a giant step forward to lower that. We want to keep that in stride, and we want to make sure that it will be the same, or in this case, slightly lower, and we can get even lower than that, have a similar trend, we'd be there. But we think at a minimum, this is strong
But
commitment.
do you think $1 is significant in any way, shape, or form? I mean, wouldn't it make sense to just kind of equate that to saying that it stays at the same rate?
No, I still think it's significant when you particularly compare it to that same chart as to where it would have been if we continued to trend under Governor Doyle. You look at the dollar difference there, and it's quite significant in terms of where people would be at and where other states are going. When you look at our neighboring states, I'm not aware of any of the states close nearby who have that kind of property tax relief in place.
Governor, so you're saying in February, your specifics, the plan will include some kind of tax controls and some form of buy down on the property taxes?
Yeah, we haven't sorted out much as we did with this, where we had discussions with the legislature on how much do we put in property tax relief, how much do we put in income tax relief. We'll probably also be looking at other years we could provide tax relief. But we wanted, and why it was appropriate to do it here in planning for meeting and talking to the Realtors Association, was these are the folks who probably talk to people the most about property taxes, because that's always one of the, other than people paying them in December, the other place that people hear the most about are from realtors, because they ask about how much are property taxes in one given community versus another. And so we kind of wanted to lay out what our long-term goal was to help them kind of lay out their course for what their strategy was going forward. But we'll want to work with members of the Assembly and the Senate in the next year about the right way to do that. Is it all through technical college buy down? Is it through property tax relief, through school aids? Is it credits? It's a combination of those things. Those are things we're all working on. I think the more important thing is to lay out the top line priority and then work as we have collaboratively with the members of the legislature to figure out the best way to get there.
Will you talk about how this will directly impact the technical colleges?
In terms of what we proposed and what I'll be hopefully signing after the Senate and the Assembly approve and then concur, it has no impact in terms of governance. And so that's a debate others have enacted in the past. But what we proposed and potentially what we put in the next budget would really just be ways of looking at buying down the impact on the levy, not about fundamentally changing the governance. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Joe?